So our next segment will feature Paul. He is, you probably saw on the clip, an employment lawyer from Oshawa, leader of the Freedom Party since 2002, taking over from former leader here, Lloyd Walker, and previous leader Jack Plan. Personally responsible, I would say, for elevating Freedom Party's notoriety, infamousy, status, on the internet especially, to heights no other party can dare claim. Filmmaker with the Principle of Pot, which I think you're going to be telling us a little bit about later on. Documentarian. So, without further ado, because I think a lot of people already are familiar with it, Paul McKeever.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends of freedom, the year was 1984. The radio was full of music by Madonna and Cyndi Lauper, Billy Joel and Billy Idol. Hondas, one of the favorite vehicles on the road today, had a reputation for being rust buckets. There were no cell phones. There were no fax machines. Hardly anyone had a computer. And the few people who had a computer had something that was really not much more than a glorified typewriter. The Cold War was still underway. The Berlin Wall was still standing, and we still feared that the Russians might any day send missiles over the Arctic Circle to blow Canada up. 40 years of progressive conservative rule, over 40 years, had given us socialized medicine, higher taxes, higher regulation, more oppression, less freedom. And two young men from London, Robert Metz and his partner in crime, as it were, Mark Emery, decided to fight back by forming Freedom Party. The media in 1984 were none too friendly to freedom lovers. Much like now, all of the newspapers, the TV stations, the radio stations were owned by liberals or progressive conservatives. They decided what everyone got to hear, what everyone got to see, what everyone got to read. There was no Googling it. You got pre-digested, pre-edited stuff that came to you courtesy of the two major parties in Canada. Freedom Party's initial task was to say, and it was a long-term one, we have to establish ourselves as a voice for individual freedom, a voice that's not going to disappear a year from now, a month from now, but something that is a permanent fixture in Canadian politics and that will always be here to advocate individual freedom and to advocate it properly. But to do that, Freedom Party had to do some very unconventional things. They had to break from tradition in the political world. Instead of just running in elections at election time, Freedom Party had to be more like an activist group. And so with the help of some of the people even in this room here, Freedom Party did things like run a citywide campaign against taxpayer funding for the 1991 Pan Am Games. And in doing so, it won that bid. And there was no taxpayer funding for the 91 Games. In fact, that Games went to Cuba, where it belonged. Freedom Party fought Sunday shopping. Notoriously, it was cross-country coverage of what was going on. Bob Metz, Mark Emery being reported in the Globe and Mail and national papers. And in 1992, we prevailed. We didn't get to pull the trigger on that law. We didn't get to repeal it. But it was sure joyful seeing the primary advocates of banning Sunday shopping, or who had become the primary advocates, the NDP, being the ones that repealed it in 1992. And then in the 2000s, Robert Metz probably became the first freedom advocate in Canada to take on the human rights commissions, and did so successfully, defending a London landlord against some scurrilous accusations that were being made, cleared him of the accusation of having been engaged in racist things. Now, by 2002, when Lloyd Walker stepped down, he's right over here for everybody. Please introduce yourself if you haven't met him yet. It's a great guy.
Hi, Lloyd.
By that time, Freedom Party had 18 years on the ground. 18 years had been used to properly advocate freedom, to identify Freedom Party as the voice for freedom in Canada. Its reputation could not be challenged. It was time to get on with the next task, and that was to make the changes necessary to the organization so that the media and the public would see Freedom Party not only as an advocacy group, not only as a group that was out there disturbing the peace, as it were, but a group that you could look to as a supplier of high-quality candidates for office, people who would literally take the reins of power and change the law for the better. So we made several changes going into the 2003 election. We adopted a constitution. We updated our website. Our website was years ahead of the other websites. We were delivering materials, video, audio. I don't think we had audio, actually. We had photographic stuff that just was not even on the radar yet for the other political parties. We were in a devastating ad in the National Post that actually triggered the election. We had candidate training sessions across the province, and we ran more candidates in 2003 than we had ever run before. I think it was 24 in that election. And for doing so, we were rewarded quite nicely. I remember that Steve Paikin in 2003 had a number of parties, not all of them, on his show, Studio 2 it was at the time. And the reason that Freedom Party got on there was precisely because we had managed to run 24 candidates. As well as we'd done that campaign, it didn't translate into vote increases. We didn't, of course, win any seats. But the election of 2003 taught us a few things. It turned out a lot of people vote not just for the great, I mean, we had a great platform. It was well researched. We were complimented on it by experts in their respective fields. But we learned that a lot of people don't really vote because of the issues. A lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people just have sort of a feeling, a general feeling. That guy looks like a guy I can trust. Barry Malcolm. And we needed to boost that end of the party. So we said, what is our essential character? Well, we have this black and white view of things. There's right and there's wrong. We are a party of principle, and we want people to know it. And we made it part of our brand, the black and white. You can see it behind me. We had this actually starting in 2005, I believe. Carol Vandenberg created this for us. She's an expert quilter. And feel free to give her a round of applause, by the way, because I didn't. But more than that, we ran a platform that year that, yes, it dealt with the issues, it focused, told people what we were proposing to do, but it also told people that what we were proposing was morally right, that it was principled. Black and white, there was no gray about it. When we released that platform in 2005, the media largely ignored us, just like always. We'd been putting media releases out for years. And we decided, you know what? We're going to have to do an end run around the media. We cannot rely upon them to get our message out for us. And luckily, in 2006, some new technology came in. YouTube. An engineer friend of mine in Ottawa told me about it before it had really taken off, and I decided, let's look into this. And we immediately seized the opportunity to grab a FP Ontario channel. And as the various issues were moving through the legislature, being discussed by the PCs, the Liberals, the NDP, and being reported upon in our newspapers, TV, and radio, Freedom Party was a self-publisher. We had videos on our own channel where we explained what our position was on each of these issues that were being discussed in the legislature and why the other parties had it wrong. And we were rewarded with attention, let me tell you. At the same time that was going on, I was also doing another channel, the Paul McKeever channel, to sort of deal with the more theoretical things, the philosophical things, so that people sort of knew what is necessary for freedom to happen. And Bob, as he was explaining earlier in 2007, early before the election, had the great opportunity, which has now really blossomed with Robert and Robert, Bob and Rob, Bob and Bob, with a great radio show that has really caught the ear of especially Londoners, but is now listened to by people who I know of. They're listened to in Italy. It's listened to in the United States because they have a feed, and the whole archive of the radio show is available on the Just Right website. With all of that going for us, hundreds and thousands of people watching our videos, writing to us saying they were blown away. it still didn't translate into votes. We ran a great campaign. We had great marketing. We had people complimenting us on our stands. We've all had it. Anyone who's been a candidate, sir, I really like your party. I think you're the greatest. And I'm voting for the Liberal, I sort of tell you, but I really think you're great. Steve Paikin said on 2007 when he had me on for a second time, and he said, yeah, they're watching you, but they're not voting for you. And so we had to sit down and really think this through. What's going on? How can a party be literally thousands of times more popular in terms of the message, in terms of the policies we're putting out there, the ideas, the commentary? How can so many people be attracted to us and wanting to watch us and see what we have to say? And almost nobody, and I've seen Tim Hudak videos with a vote count of 6 hits. 6 people watched it. A month later. That's crazy. And yet the PCs and the Liberals were getting the votes. We're getting the attention. What's that all about? Well, clearly, it is the case that the Liberals and the Conservatives, being long-standing parties, they have party loyalists. They would vote, there are Conservatives who would vote for a monkey if he wore a blue suit in a given riding. There are ridings where people have never voted anything except Conservative. Literally. So those party loyalists, there's not much you can do with them. They're going to vote the same way until they die. But they're not all of the electorate. There are clearly people who decide on an election-by-election basis, we'll call them the free agents, who they're going to vote for. How do they vote? And that's really where we've been turning our attention, because that's our future. Well, the one essential thing we seem to have discovered is that the majority of those free agents, they vote not according necessarily to ideas or ideology. They just need a big hammer. They need a way to get out whoever's in power if they don't like the party in power. If they do like the party in power, well, heck, they'll be right along with everybody else voting for them. But if they don't, that's when they're going to look for other alternatives. Ones that they think are feasible. Now, there's one kind of party they won't turn to. And that's a party that's just like the party they're trying to get rid of. Now, we saw an example of this back in 1995. I don't know if anyone remembers that election or the name Lynn MacLeod. But she at the time was the leader of the Liberal Party. And the Liberal Party was the opposition party in the Ontario legislature. The governing party was Bob Rae's NDP. And Bob Rae's NDP was facing a situation in 1995 that's quite a bit like what Dalton McGuinty's facing right now. He was on the outs. Everybody knew it. The ship was going down. The rats were jumping from the ship. And the polls were showing that this Lynn MacLeod person, who no one had much heard of, was leading the Liberals to victory because the polls said so. They were the ones that were popular. The third party at the time, this little tiny party, was the Progressive Conservatives. And they did something that rocked Lynn MacLeod's world. What they did was they targeted not the governing NDP, but the kings that would be, according to the polls. They said, we're not going to bother with the ship that's already sinking. We're going to sink the ship that seems to be rising. And they did a brilliant job of doing one key thing. They demonstrated that the Lynn MacLeod Liberals were exactly the same as the Bob Rae NDP. They made sure that every Ontarian knew that if you replaced an NDP candidate with a Liberal candidate, you were going to get 4 or 5 more years of the same horrible, oppressive government. And at the same time they were targeting number 2, they were giving Ontarians hope with some pretty common sense ideas. Things that people thought, how come no one's done that yet? Things that ideologically the other parties just would not do, but that there was a considerable appetite for in the general populace. The rest is history. The third place party zoomed to the top. The NDP fell off the map. Lynn MacLeod I think she retired after that, after being portrayed on the end of a chicken or something, spinning on a weather vane. And the PCs won back-to-back majority governments. The election of 2011 is shaping up much the same way as the election of 1995. The players have changed a bit. The governing party is not the NDP, it's the Liberals. The opposition party is not the PCs, not the Liberals, it's the PCs. But the PCs are making the exact same mistake that Lynn McLeod made in 1995. What is it? They're not differentiating themselves at all from the governing Liberals. They're singing essentially from the same hymn book as the Dalton McGuinty Liberals. Now, just consider this. Hudak's PCs in recent weeks and months have been criticizing the daylights out of Dalton McGuinty for bringing in the HST. Well, just yesterday we learned that Tim Hudak stated in, I can't remember which Eastern riding, that no, he's not going to replace the HST. Well, what was all that yelling and screaming about for the last several months? Like the McGuinty Liberals, the Hudak Conservatives are on the record as saying we must fight climate change. And in fact, the McGuinty Liberals aren't doing a good enough job at fighting climate change. We'll do more of it. We'll do it harder. We'll do it faster. Oh my goodness. Well, how are the Liberals doing it? Well, the Liberals are doing it by forcing us all to pay for this hugely expensive wind power and solar power. It's growing to be the case that we're seeing that these rates are just going to keep going up and up and up, and people are getting angry. And they should be getting angry. So what do we see the progressive Conservatives doing? We're going to fight climate change. Wait, whoa, buddy, what do you think the other guy was doing that led to this catastrophe in the first place? How are you planning to do this? Well, what we thought we'd do is take a page out of the book from 1970s and 1980s and build new nuclear facilities. You mean the ones we're still paying for? The ones we owe $20 billion on? And did you know that the price tag is $26 billion a pop? For now. Exactly. You know the price is going to be higher. This is madness. And as soon as the population realizes that the progressive Conservatives are going down the same path, they're going to be equally angry with those progressive Conservatives. The number of children attending schools in the last 7 years has continued to decline. Yet under the McGuinty Liberals, the per-child cost of education has gone up 57%. 57%. And think about this. The ministry office itself, the budget there, and it's no small budget, it's gone up 300%. Has anybody heard a word out of Tim Hudak's progressive Conservatives about these budgets? Not a thing. Silence. No one, with 57% increase, not a word. We hear about eco fees, a few $1 million. But the billions that are being blown out the school windows, not a word. Silence, status quo. We've got a healthcare system right now where patients are being brought in the front door and couriered over to the ambulance parking garage. Why? Because there's nowhere to put them. So they've set up temporary beds, permanent beds, in ambulance garages. They're set up in hallways. The public is walking by desperately sick people who have no security. There's no guarantee that they're being served by the nurses in the hospital. The facilities aren't there. They're exposed to the public. The public is exposed to them. Where's the outrage? Where do we see Tim Hudak on there condemning the monstrosity that has become socialized medicine? Not a word, not a policy, not a proposal, not a complaint. Silence. That is a government waiting to happen to be an exact replica of the McGuinty Liberals. Keep in mind that 65 cents of every Ontario tax dollar is spent on health care. This is not a small ticket item. This is almost the whole enchilada. So why? Why are the PCs so quiet? Why aren't they saying anything? Because they're the most popular party in Ontario. And they think that if they just say nothing, if Tim Hudak says nothing, if he promises nothing, then maybe when Dalton McGuinty gets pushed out of office, he'll get sucked in by the vacuum. But you know, the reality is he's not really the most popular party, or his is not really the most popular party in Ontario. It's the least unpopular party. And the reason it's the least unpopular is precisely because nobody knows who they are or what they stand for. We've got to make sure they do. And we're going to make sure they do. And we've already started to make sure that they do. Tim Hudak's strategy is essentially the exact same one that Lynn McLeod used in 1995. And it was her undoing, because it left her open. The progressive Conservatives could torpedo her. They could warn the public, and the public were frightened off. Those swing voters, those free agents said, well, I'm going to replace the NDP, but I'm sure as heck not going to replace it with a Liberal. That'll be just the same or worse. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing, because that is the truth about the progressive Conservatives in Ontario. They are exactly the same as the Liberals, or worse. This time out, we're going to have an platform. We'll have all three. But we'll have a platform that's unlike any we've run before. But we don't just have a great platform. We've got a strategy. As I said before, those free agents, the ones that we're hoping to get, are voting strategically. They vote for parties and people that they think other people are going to vote for, because the whole point is there's enough of us voting for this guy that we'll be able to get rid of the other guy. Well, how do they know how the other people are going to vote? There's only one tool that they all use: the political poll. Every few weeks, every month or two, in the newspapers, on the radio, on the TV, people get to see these poll results. So-and-so is ahead of so-and-so. The Liberals are at this much, the Conservatives are at this much, the Greens, and so on. That's how that swing voter decides who to place his vote with, because he's looking at the strength of the vote, not so much what they stand for. Now, we never get included in those polls. If you've ever been asked, who would you vote for, the answers they give you are this multiple choice: Progressive Conservative, Liberal, NDP, and Green. Shame. Yes, absolutely, shame. Well, you might ask yourself, why do the Greens get included? They don't have any seats in the legislature. Is this some Liberal bias? It's actually not. I've spoken with a pollster about what happened, and I'll tell you. A few years back, during one of the elections, the Greens scored double digits in a couple of ridings. In fact, in one of those ridings, they came in number 2 behind the Progressive Conservative, who won. So one of the polling companies, I think it was Environics, said, you know what? There's one reason why we don't ever include these other parties, and I'll tell you what it is. He says, we have about a 3% margin of error. And usually in these polls, we say PC, Liberal, NDP, or other, and other gets, 3%, 5%. So if we split other into all the different parties that make up other, well, they're only going to get about a 0.5% or 1% or 2% each. They're going to be within the 3% margin of error. What's the point? Because none of the data are going to be significant. But now that the Greens have won 10% or 30-some-odd% in a couple of ridings, maybe we should just test the water. Maybe we should include them in one of our surveys and see what happens. And they did it, and they found somewhere in the range of 4 to 8% survey after survey. So the other polling companies started doing the same thing. And now when you're watching TV at night and they bring on the poll results, what do you see? Liberal, PC, NDP, Green. They're one of the 4 parties that swing voter thinks is the parties that people are going to vote for. We've just been shown an example. The Greens have given us an example. Win a couple of ridings, not in terms of winning the seat, but get some really good percentages in a couple of ridings. Make yourself statistically significant. Get up over that 3% margin of error. And the pollsters will have a reason to include you. They'll want to know. The veracity of their data depends on it. And when you get included, when you see yourself, trust me, when you see PC, Liberal, NDP, Green, Freedom Party on the CTV News, the CBC News, Global, there's going to be this little spark of hope. But it's the one that's missing right now. That little thing, is it all worth it? Why am I here tonight? Maybe I should have done something else. Some of you, there's a little part of you wonders if maybe there's no hope. Well, there's always hope, trust me. The Reform Party came out of nowhere. The Greens certainly came out of nowhere. But they didn't just do it by chance. They worked hard. They had a strategy. They won a couple of ridings. They didn't win the riding, they didn't win the seats, but they got significant percentages, and anybody who puts their mind to it and their money to it can do the same thing. So how are we going to, in this election, attempt to get those double-digit results in a few ridings? Well, there's a few things we need to do. One, we have to put our biggest efforts into the growing number of ridings where Liberals are literally deciding not to run again. I don't know if you've seen this in the news recently, just in the last few days. But the Speaker of the House is not going to run again. Steve Peters, has been one of the most popular politicians in the province, is stepping down. Why? He's not so clear on that. But we do know that another Liberal MPP yesterday said they're not going to run. I can't remember which riding it was in. And it's rumored that the Wayne Arthurs, the former mayor in that, I think it was of Ajax, he's not going to run again. And in fact, it's gotten so bad that the Liberal insiders are saying, it seems like someone's dropping off every day. And it's so bad, they're going to have a meeting and bring together all the Liberal MPPs who aren't going to run again and make one big giant announcement so they don't have to have so many bombs going off spread over so many days. They're going to have one big explosion and just hope that it'll all go away. So there are going to be a number of ridings where there's no incumbent. There's going to be high entropy. Anybody could possibly win. Anybody who's palatable. Anybody who's not a Dalton McGuinty Liberal. Anyone who doesn't look like one, smell like one, taste like one, or anything like that. We have to focus on those ridings especially. We have one, Ray Monteith's riding. That's where Steve Peters is leaving. We've got to expose Tim Hudak for the Lynn MacLeod that he is. We've got to expose him as the Dalton McGuinty. We've got to make sure that people in those ridings know that if they go and replace a Liberal MPP with a progressive Conservative candidate, it's going to be 4 more years, no different than if they'd simply re-elected the Liberal. It's going to be horrible for them. That's the truth, and it's our obligation as candidates and as a party to make sure the public knows that. At the same time, we've got to do just like the Conservatives did in 1995. We've got to present to them common sense ideas that they like. And we have to make sure that they see our ideas. That means advertising. And our research to date suggests that our best approach, our best bang for the buck, is going to be local TV, something like the A Channel, in those ridings where we're really trying. London's got the A Channel. It's only, I think A Channel's maybe in four different districts in Ontario. But where we're going to have those swing ridings, we've got to make our message known on TV. And we think it's fiscally possible this time around. Which issues? What are we going to campaign on? One of the things we've learned is if we campaign on healthcare and education and auto insurance and electricity, those are all fine issues. Those are perennial issues. Those are big ticket issues. And that's all we campaigned on in 2007. But that turned out to be a problem. And the reason is, as we've learned, people think those problems are so big, so complex, that they're not fixable. They've seen government after government after government try and fail to fix the problem with healthcare, to fix the problem with the cost of electricity, to fix soaring rates, thanks guys, soaring rates on auto insurance and reduced benefits. They don't, A, really have a good grasp of what the problem is, B, really know how to fix it, C, think anyone will ever be able to fix it. And so they don't get all passionate about that. When was the last time you heard a 25-year-old healthy male get really excited about a 5% decrease in the waiting time for hip replacements? Not going to happen. Not the kind of thing that gets the guy all fired up and calling into the local radio show and saying, I'm mad as hell! No, he's not. He couldn't care less. There's 3 things that our planks need to do to get those passions going, to get people interested in supporting us and thinking, hey, I think I'm going to pick to replace the Liberal guy, I'm going to pick the Freedom Party guy. The planks have to be understandable. People don't understand the intricacies of nuclear versus wind versus solar. But tell the guy that I'm going to knock $5 off a case of beer. He understands that. The proposed change has to be relevant to the person. There's lots of issues that are relevant only to smaller sets of the population. So you need to cover the various groups. Make sure you have enough of those small, easily identified, easily understandable planks that some of them are of interest to different groups. That they have a personal stake in it. It's going to make their life better, or it's going to remove some annoyance. And finally, they have to be planks that they believe could actually be accomplished, things that they think the government could actually do if they just stood up the plate and did them. Sometimes we call these common sense planks. And I'm not trying to borrow anyone else's lingo. In fact, Bob Metz was using the phrase common sense before the PC stole it from us. So in the 2011 election platform, you're still going to see those solid answers to the big perennial problems, principled, free market answers. However, we're going to balance those out with a good number of easily understood, personally valuable, personally relevant, and doable proposed changes to the way we govern this province. We began releasing our planks mid-October. You can now go to the website, which is freedomparty.on.ca, and you can read them. But unlike the other parties, you can also, if you prefer not to read, you can listen to them. You can click on a little button, and I personally read each and every plank to you, one at a time. You don't have to listen to all of them. But some of us don't have that kind of time. Who the heck wants to listen to any more of me? Well, unfortunately, there is a way of listening more to me, but it's much, much shorter. So with each of the 5 planks we've put out a 30-second.
So far.
Yeah, so far every plank so far has had a 30-second video pre-election ad, and we've uploaded those to YouTube, and we've made sure the media know that they're out there. What do? They demonstrate that while Tim Hudak is proposing a whole lot of nothing going on, Freedom Party is actually thinking and doing kind of what his predecessor did. Those common sense ideas that people like. We're going to put them to shame. So just to give you a taste of where we're going, and this is only 5 of I can tell you many more of these common sense planks. I'm going to show you now the 5 that we've got available online. And then I'll come back and I'll just tell you a little bit more about where else we're going.
Ontario's Liberals and Progressive Conservatives believe that the top priority for Ontario's electricity system is fighting climate change. Dalton McGuinty's Liberals want to fight climate change by forcing you to pay hugely inflated prices for wind and solar power. Tim Hudak's Progressive Conservatives want to fight climate change by forcing you to pay tens of billions of dollars for new nuclear power generators. We haven't even paid for the old ones yet. I'm Paul McKeever, and I won't spend your money trying to prevent natural climate change. A Freedom government will ensure that top priority is given to supplying you with the lowest price electricity available. Imagine it's voting day in Ontario. Some of us are enjoying time with our children. Some of us are cooking. Some of us find it difficult to get around. And some of us are stuck at the office, working late, and the polls are closing. I'm Paul McKeever. Isn't it time we were able to vote with one of these? A Freedom government will make it happen. Voting with security, privacy, and convenience. Another forward-looking idea from Freedom Party. The Senate. They call it Canada's House of Sober Second Thought. But since the birth of Canada, Canada's Liberals and Progressives have treated it as a retirement club for party loyalists. Hello, I'm Paul McKeever, leader of Freedom Party of Ontario. A Freedom government will give you what Ontario's Liberals and Progressive Conservatives have denied Ontario for over 143 years. The democratic right to elect Ontario's Senate nominees. Another forward-looking idea from Freedom Party. Canada's courts made the medicinal use of cannabis legal over a decade ago. Still, all we hear is this.
Here's what I would do as Premier. We'd close down drug ops.
As a result, police continue to raid medical cannabis dispensaries as part of an American-style war on cannabis. A Freedom government will make medical cannabis dispensaries a recognized part of Ontario's healthcare system. It will be illegal for the police to raid a medical cannabis dispensary. Compassion from Freedom Party. In 2003, Dalton McGuinty promised he wouldn't raise taxes. As soon as he became Premier, he imposed a $3 billion per year health premium. After his 2007 election, Mr. McGuinty said the new HST would be revenue neutral. He now admits it's another $3 billion tax increase. A Freedom government will eliminate Mr. McGuinty's $3 billion health premium so that the HST will indeed be revenue neutral, as was promised to you. Responsible tax elimination from Freedom Party.
So I hope you enjoyed those. You're going to see more in the coming months. And that's the kind of thing that we hope to put out on your local television station. I think you might agree that they'll get some attention, maybe a few laughs, and certainly put us out of that field where people say, I've never heard of you before. Over the coming months, we're going to keep the pressure up. We're going to make sure that people know that if they replace a Liberal with a Progressive Conservative, they're going to get more of the same horrible result. And we're going to continue to present, possibly as much as once per week, we didn't put one out this week, common sense plank after common sense plank so that people see that these guys aren't proposing the undoable. They're not proposing something that's confusing. They're not proposing something that's got no relevance to me. This is good stuff. I like this. How come the other guys aren't doing this? And hopefully by the end of 6 months, there'll be enough of that they say, I'm ready, where do I sign up? So what do we do going forward? We'll deal with overtaxation. I'm not going to give you the actual policies yet. That would be letting too much out of the bag. Let's have some fun with this. But these are the problems we're going to be talking about. Overtaxation. We're going to cast aside all of the political correctness and propose measures to protect Ontario's freedom, democracy, and government institutions from the kind of theocratic risks that we're finding in Africa and in Europe. We're not going to let political correctness stand in the way. We're going to eliminate the various subsidies that the McGuinty Liberals and before them the Progressive Conservatives brought in to support companies that apparently can't survive without stealing your money. We'll repeal some of the sillier bans that the McGuinty government has brought in over the last several years. We'll restore fairness and privacy to our electoral systems and make voting more convenient. We'll tackle the spiraling costs of electricity and auto insurance. We'll lay the foundation for choice in education and in healthcare. Once and for all, we'll overhaul the laws governing the distribution and the cost of alcoholic beverages in the province. We'll take steps to ensure that taxpayers aren't stuck with the costs, the overruns, the billions in overruns that are inevitably going to result from the 2015 Pan Am Games that are going to be held in Toronto, for which Ontario, thanks to Dalton McGuinty, has become the guarantor. And amongst other things, and I find this very important, it's one of the most important issues, I think, facing us. We'll say no to carbon trading schemes and other economy-killing, anti-industrial, anti-capitalist schemes that are being proposed by the climate change extremists. Yeah. In short, friends, we're going to give Ontario a chance. And if we do it the right way, I think it's a chance they'll want to take. All we have to do is work for it, and I'm confident that with a crowd like this, we're going to make it work. Let's at least get ourselves those double-digit votes, and who knows, maybe we'll even get a seat. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. I think everybody here can appreciate the amount of work that goes into producing all of these features that Paul and Bob put together to promote the profile of Freedom Party. I think it's working. You can see it in the stats on the computers and the internet. You can see it in the enthusiasm from our executive. Our executive is meeting more and more frequently. We're now meeting every few weeks. Coming up to the next election next October, isn't it? October 6th of next year. You're going to see more invitations come in the mail for events like this. Your support is actually doing things. It's actually being put to work. And I hope that you continue your great support of this Freedom Party. And I'm sure that with your continued support, Paul's leadership, Bob's acumen and knowledge and skills, that we will see in the near future Freedom Party not only get recognition by the surveyors and the pollsters, but you'll see us more often on the television. You'll see us more often actively engaged out in the community, and one of these days you'll see a Freedom Party government. Good night, everybody.